Welcome to our episode of Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. Sponsored by Bible Interact and hosted by Dr. George Sparks. Now let's explore the field of archaeology in today's episode.
Well, good day to everybody. This is Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down. My name is George Sparks, and my co-host is Dr. David Graves. He received his PhD from Aberdeen University in Scotland. Today, he's got a really interesting presentation. It's on the Roman baths. You're going to need to pay attention on this one because what he's actually going to do is I got a little preview. So I'm not going to be the spoiler alert here, but the preview will be, he's going to show us different locations of Roman baths. And then he's going to take it through a PowerPoint through a Roman bath system. So, and there's different rooms with different names, and each room has its own function. And this is what he's going to teach us today. Good morning, Dr. Graves.
Morning, George. Good to be with you. Yes, we'll try and do a little bit of a tour of what the ancient baths look like. And I worked at one for 15 years, so it's something near and dear to my heart. And you've got some pretty cool artifacts. That's what kind of inspired me to go off in this direction. So we'll talk about those a little bit later as well. So fun podcast today, I think.
Yeah, because I went to the museum. Once to give credit to the Museum of Archaeology and Biblical History. They loaned us some really cool artifacts, and I picked up some iron weapons. And along with them was a Roman surgical sword. I never seen one before, so it's extremely rare. And then it was a strigil in really good condition. And David saw it, and he got all excited. So right away, he started plotting the PowerPoint the presentation. So here we go.
George, did you mean
Yes,
a Roman surgical saw?
Did I say sword? Saw, yeah.
You got a couple of swords, but yeah, it was a saw. Okay,
It's
good.
a saw, not a surgical sword, man. That would be wicked. Thanks for correcting me.
Two in one.
Well, just to enlighten the audience here, I had a kidney stone last week, so they really doped me up really good, right? So it might have been a sword that I saw or a saw that I sword. I'm not sure.
Good. Well, we'll get on to Roman baths. I'll get my PowerPoint started up here and we can jump in, as we say. So we're going to talk about the Roman bath complex and exploring some of its architecture and some of the artifacts. An AI-generated image here on the cover just gives you an idea of what a Roman bath kind of looks like. Pretty accurate. I usually have to play around with these a little bit in order to get what I'm looking for and making sure that they're somewhat accurate to reality. Rather than just making stuff up. I have to educate AI in order to get what I'm looking for, is what I'm trying to say. Two of my books on the archaeology of the New Testament, and also Jesus Speaks to the Seven Churches, have material in there on the Roman baths, as well as my illustrated dictionary of biblical archaeology. And you'll find all of these terms that I'm going to be talking about today defined for you in the archaeology dictionary. It's a hardcover, and it's got lots of photographs in there, and you'll find that helpful if you're trying to work through some of the terminology, because a lot of it's in Latin. Well, here's probably one of the most famous ones. This is a bath of Caracalla in Rome. This is the southwest of the Caldarium. This one here is Beth Shean, in Israel. One of the drawings on one of their displays that gives you an idea of what it looked like inside of the bath, one of the rooms of the bath. So the bathhouse featured prominently in Roman social life. So it's sort of the central activities, you might say. Along with the theater, you had the bathhouse. A little bit like the YMCA today. So rich and poor alike could afford the minimal entrance fee. Children were usually admitted free. So they tried to make it accessible to everybody. Frequently, the baths not only were used for the sake of cleanliness, but to meet friends for a chat and enjoy a game of dice or just closing a business deal. It was a social spot, but it had utilitarian, purposes. And we have sort of a reference to this possibly in the message to the church in Laodicea in Revelation. So because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. And I was just reviewing an article by a friend of mine, Dr. Mark Wilson. He published a paper in Tyndale Journal where he tries to make the argument that the hot and the cold refers to the bathhouse, the bath complex. While I think there's a certain sense of a connection to that, I disagreed with him. And anyway, it just got me thinking more and more on the bath complex issues and some of the archaeology around it. But there could be a connection in some way. Certainly the people that lived in Laodicea knew about bathhouses. There was 4 of them there, and in the back of their mind, they certainly had this idea of the lukewarm room and the hot bath and the cold bath. So there could have been a local reference here in this passage. There's where Laodicea is, and there's a plan of the city, and there's the east and the west and the central bath. That's 14, 15, and 16 on the map. You can find those numbers. And then the gymnasium and bath complex, because they were often joined together, is number 5. So again, because there were hot springs here in Hierapolis across the valley, across the Lycus Valley, they had a lot of hot and cold water that they could use. So this became a very popular place. There's the central bath, the south on this map. There's a photograph of it, Laodicea, the bathhouse, the central one. And Turkish archaeologists have been working here the last few years doing some restoration work. You see a crane there in the background. And so they've done quite a bit of work around the area for Laodicea. So here you get a chance to go to Turkey. It's worth visiting. It's pretty spectacular what they've done. This is what it originally kind of looked like, buried underneath the ground. And so they've done a lot of excavation there and revealed much of the area. So here's the plan of the southern bath and the different rooms. We'll explain what those are in a few moments. There's a drawing of the one at Bet Shean in Israel, of what it would have looked like. I mean, every city had a bath, like every city had a theater. So these were popular centers in Roman culture. And that's a breakaway of it and what it looked like with all the different rooms identified. We'll talk about them. There's a model at Beth Shean in Israel that shows what it looked like from the top. These are fairly large complexes. So the strigil. What is a strigil? We're going to show you one that George has. This is a photograph of it here. It's a curved metal tool used in ancient Rome for personal hygiene. It was integral to the Roman bath culture. So with that in mind, this is where it was used, but we'll get into a little more detail of how it was used here in a moment. First, I want to take you through a virtual walkthrough of the different rooms and how this complex all works. So we begin here on the outside, down here in the bottom. You walk into a room there and you go through here, and you go through here, and through here, and here, and here. And you notice that each of these rooms have pools. They all have water in them. It's like a big swimming pool, but has different rooms in it. When we stayed in Jordan at the Movenpick Hotel, they had a large bath complex with a hot bath, cold bath, and so they had a similar kind of setup. And so you walk through and you experience these different rooms, but you have a specific order in which you go in. We're going to start down here, the tabernae. Here's a tabernae here, a painting of one in Pompeii. It was a food and hot beverage booth that you stopped at. You might want to get a little bit of a snack before you go to the swimming pool, or you can stop on the way out afterwards. There was also a thermopylaeum. And this is basically a counter heated with a for hot beverages. That became also a meeting point for the bathers. You're going to say, we're going to meet down at the tabernae. And I'll meet you there at 3 o'clock, and we're going to go in. Actually, they probably would have showed up around 10 o'clock in the morning because they spent a lot of time there. So you could go in for a short dip, or you could go in for a long bathe. People that had a lot of money and didn't have a job, you can go in there and spend the whole day. But if you had a job to go to, you may only get in a few minutes.
So David, the tabernae, is that like a modern day, like Starbucks?
Yeah, a little bit like a modern day Starbucks, or here in Canada, we have the Tim Hortons.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so you stop at the Tim's, go for a Tim's. I got my Tim's in the cup. I actually don't go to Tim's. I brew my own because it's better, but it's pretty popular. So this is the thermopylaeum, the one in Herculaneum in Italy. And what they would do is they would have a big pot. They'd have a fire underneath of here, and they'd have like a hot soup, and then on top of the counter they might have a place that looked like a big coffee machine, but they would boil water in that, and that you could have hot and cold water. Sometimes they put snow in their wine, and sometimes they put hot water in their wine, and but you never offered anybody anything lukewarm, and so that's why I think the passage in Laodicea refers to the banquet, or to the thermopylaeum of the shops here, the tabernae. There are some shops in Rome, in the market, the Trajan market in Rome, what they would have looked like. These doors that they have on here, shutters, are modern. They've just put them on, but they would have looked very similar to that in ancient times. So again, food, hot beverages, the thermopylae, and the meeting point for bathers. So that's the first spot. You'd stop here, the meeting point, and then you'd go in through the door here. Next, you go into the next room, and that next room is the epidaterium. This is the changing room. So you have to change your clothes. Got to take off your robes. You got to take off your sandals. So again, the entry point, the changing room, and storage area for your clothing. Sort of lockers, benches, these little trays above here. You see them right here with the dividers on them. That's where you'd stash your clothes, your valuables. Sometimes they'd have little wall niches that you'd place things in. And here you have a little fountain where you could wash your hands. And again, meeting point for the bathers. Here's another picture of it. You can see the wooden trays and a little clear here. This is the one in Herculaneum. Remember, this was all covered by the earth, or the volcano. Mount Vesuvius exploded and covered this all over and buried everything. But you can still see some of the paint on the walls. So they were beautifully decorated inside. And Marshall, one of the ancient writers, spoke of clothing guards, because you might be thinking to yourself, if I just drop all my stuff up here in this tray, you can be sure that when you come back for your clothes, they'd be gone. And you'd be right. And so Marshall in his writings mentions Aper, who employed a one-eyed woman who watched over his belongings. I think it's kind of hilarious that he talks about the one-eyed woman watching over with her one eye his belongings. So there's a little bit of humor there in his statement, but we all get the point. So sometimes they'd have to hire somebody to protect your stuff. And if you didn't have a clothing guard, you could find yourself the victim of a thief who would be receiving some vengeance from the gods. Now, the next room that we're going to go into is the cold room, called the frigidarium. It's where we get our word for refrigerator, right? Frigidarium, yes. Frigius. And that's the next room that we come into there with a bath. There's a little bit of some water that they could get into, but this was the cold bath. And the purpose of the cold bath, of course, is that it would, close up your pores. That would be refreshing after a hot, dusty time outside as well, and close the pores, because you're going to be experiencing some of the other pools later. So it's a cold pool plunge, open air or a dome design usually. And here we see the circular dome. Again, beautiful colored painting, the red and the blue, and had some social and recreational roles. Sit around and talk to your neighbors or your friends, maybe the next business deal. Then we go into the tepidarium. This is the warm room. This is the picture here of the one in Pompeii. You see some of the little gods placed in these niches all around the room. The warm room was to acclimatize the body. You've just come from the cold room, so you want to warm up. This is moderately heated floors and walls via the hypocaust system we'll talk about in a moment. Place in relaxation and preparation for the hotter rooms. Here's the warm room again. It's the painting of it as it was viewed in the 1800s. A bit better condition. This is what the painter saw. Again, even the ceiling's painted with light coming in here from a window up here in the ceiling area. So a very pleasant room to sit around and enjoy the hot temperatures. And next you go into the caldarium. This is the hot room. So we're going from the cold room to the warm room. Now we're in the hot room right here. Here's the caldarium, the hot room, the asp of the caldarium. One here in Pompeii. This is the hottest room for sweating and deep cleansing. I went into the one that we have at the Movenpick, and it's pretty hot. So the one they had there was, they keep it pretty warm. Now you say, how do they heat this? Well, they have ways of doing that. So this is the hot pool plunge, intense heat from the hypocaust and the steam that was generated from the fire under the floor. Had vaulted ceilings, decorated mosaics and motifs. Here's the one here at the famous bath in Abbey. in England. This is the one here at the Roman bath. I want to show this one because it's pretty impressive, but it'll explain how this room sort of functions. So it's way down here. Now, if you've seen some of our other podcasts where we have the swords that George talked about earlier, were from here in Engedi, so very close to where this Masada is located. This mountain fortress. And the 3 steps of the Herod's palace, the Jewish last stand. Well, inside there's a caldarium, the bath complex there. We can see the caldarium on the floor, but underneath the floor, you had these pillars that supported it. So you have this hollow area underneath that allowed the hot air that was heated to flow through under the floor, and you'd have a heated floor. We put electrical wires in our floors today in our bathrooms and sometimes in our kitchens if you have a tile floor. To heat it, well, they use this hypercaust system. Here's the breakaway of it at the Beth Shan, their complex. This is the hypercaust floor. This is the area right here in the front of where the furnace would be and the fire. And then all of the hot air would flow down through these columns underneath the floor. The top of the floor here is missing, but I showed the one in the at Masada. And then you go to the Tatio. This is the swimming pool area out here in the Palastre. And here is the Tatio here in Italy. And again, it's in the open air. The Palastre is the sort of an open courtyard where people could go and they could play sports and play ball or do whatever they want there. Here's a view of the Palastre here. This one is in Sardis when I was visiting there. And the gymnasium behind it, so it's connected to the gymnasium, and the bath is in behind that. Open courtyard for exercise and games. Sometimes it would be a space for some wrestling or a ball game, with like a football or running around and, working up a sweat. And then you'd go into the caldarium and frigidarium and you'd work off the sweat. So this was interaction before and after the bathing. So you go in sometimes before, sometimes after. Here's the plan here of the one at Sardis. Sardis is one of the 7 cities in the book of Revelation. The church was given the letter, the message of the book of Revelation. So again, all the different elements. You have the caldarium, tepidarium, frigidarium, the marble courtyard for the gym, and the palastre. And there was a synagogue attached to the side of it later on. And then you have the latrine here. You have to have bathrooms. So you had a bathroom here. And then you had your shops all on the outside of along the road for the tabernae. So again, same kind of setup. Every city had one. Here I am back in 2008, I think. But they've got it reconstructed here, beautifully done. You can see the pillars and just how it was laid out. And to the message in Sardis, we have the phrase, shall be clothed in white raiment. Because a lot of times, people will come in with their white togas on. That would all be familiar language. The white garments were proper attire for worshipers, festival occasions, and the gymnasium. It's where you'd wear your white attire. So again, the people are familiar to this language. We're not so much today. And then for 15 years, I had the privilege of, for 10 seasons, excavating a bath complex in Jordan at the ancient site of Tel El Hammam, or Roman Livius. So there's in the red, that's the late Roman period. And then you had the early Roman period here in the blue. And the hot spring is right here where this red circle is. So it's very close, right across the path, across the street, as we might say, from the reservoir that was here to collect the water, the hot water that would be used for the Roman bath. That's right here. It's capped today because they use it for irrigating the banana fields next door here. These are bananas here, right here, and there's also bananas down here in the bottom. But they can't plow all of this because of these large, large Roman stones. That's how I first discovered it, seeing the corner of it. And then we went through this side here and traced the wall down to this corner down here. And then we found this corner down here and marked an X and dug here and found the other. So we found the 4 corners 35 by 40 meters. And what's interesting is that 35 meters is an ancient Roman arpent, which is a standardized measurement. So again, we made an X after we found the three corners. Here's Daniel doing a photography, a film of this historic moment where we break through the ground after we did our measurements. And sure enough, we found the corner. There it is right there. It's pretty neat to be able to do that. These black pipes here are the ones they use for irrigation for the banana fields, for the hot springs today. So we exposed that corner, 1.2 meters all the way around. And so here's our plan of it. This is the graph with all the squares put in. This is one of the early Roman table amphores that we discovered at the site. And here's a drawing by Dr. Lane Rittmeyer, our archaeological architect, of what the area right here looks like that we excavated. We give him all of our measurements and plans, and then he draws it in 3D to give us a better perspective. I guess today most of them are using probably 3D graphics animation, but we did it the old way. In 2009, this is what it looked like, what we had excavated. So we have the thermal bath here. And this one here is a small one, so it was for an individual, not necessarily for a big community. So that's why I believe it was probably Herod Antipas's private, personal bath complex. There's my wife down here and a couple of our helpers. We're excavating the room next to the bath right here. Oh, and there's a piece of pottery with Jesus' light shines for all. Eulogia. It's an oil lamp, part of an oil lamp that has a Greek inscription in it from the Byzantine period. The pilgrims used to come here and throw them in the bath for good luck. Here's a close-up of it. A couple of the oil lamps that we did find. One with the Byzantine cross. And then another typical early Roman. This was found on the upper towel. It wasn't found here in the bath. So we knew that the whole area was being used by the Romans. So late Roman addition in the red, early Roman here in the center. So it was added on to later to put a reservoir on it and the external area here. And we found some of these columns and pillars and pilastra. It's likely out here. So there is the inside of the bath, what it looked like. Beautifully plastered, steps going down, and your little benches you can sit on, but only room for about 2 people. So you can have you and your friends there to do a deal, for a business or something. Here's the courtyard of Bet Shan in Israel. You'll notice here as well, there's a mosaic floor. We didn't find an inlaid mosaic floor, the one in Jordan at Tel Hammam, but we found a number of tessera, the little cubes that made the floor. And now we come to the strigil. This is the exfoliation tool. In my coloring book, I have an insert here, something that the young people can color of the strigil. This is my newest coloring book of the Romans. I just published that there, I think, last week. So here is the historical context of the Roman bath we looked at. So the baths are the center of the hygiene, societal gatherings, and for relaxation, with all the different rooms as we've described them, and also a sequence of cleansing, sweating, and cooling. Here's another one, oil flask and 2 strigils to remove the oils from the body. So what they would do, they would go in, they get all sweaty. The first time when they would go in the cold room or the warm room, they would smear, the servants would smear olive oil, all over their bodies. They would lather up, and they get hot, going in the hot room, and they'd start sweating. And so, they'd have this lather of oil and sweat. And so how do you remove that? And water? Well, you do this. So you take a strigil, you'll take it, scrape it off. So they'd scrape all that oil off. Typically, they were made of bronze, sometimes iron or silver. There's a silver one that we've seen. For the wealthier individuals, you'd have your own personal one, possibly. Bring that along. You got a hook there. You'd put it on carry it around with you. Some with long handles with a curved spoon-like shape for scraping. And sometimes they had decorations on the handles. Sometimes they had, a motif of animals or of the gods, or carvings or inscriptions. We'll look at one here closely in a few minutes. So the identification tips you need to look as you're digging for curved blades, metal composition, and an archaeological context, because they're found usually around a bath. It's part of the grooming kits. Here are some of the strigils laid out on a table. So the application of the olive oil to the skin before or during the bathing. You sweat in the caldarium, open the pores, mix the oil with the dirt and the sweat you have on your body, and then you scrape the skin with a strigil to remove the oil and the dirt and the dead skin. So ancient exfoliation. The slaves of the bath staff would often assist with this process. So it's a little bit like a massage. And then you have this little bottle of oil up here. This is the Archaeologicals, used by both men and women, though most associated with the male athletes. Strigil is linked to the gymnasiums and the post-exercise cleansing. Now we found them in graves, baths, and personal kits in the archaeological context. We have them depicted in art, in the mosaics. Sometimes we have statues of them, holding them, reliefs showing them. So we know a lot about them. And also in ancient writings like Pliny, in his natural history, writes about them, talks about them. Martial as well in his writings, the Roman writers write about them. They're associated with cleanliness, discipline, and Roman identity. And so Pliny uses the word strigimentum as the process of using the strigils. Strigimentum. Say that 10 times. And he says that the Romans believed in its healing properties, including treating inflammation, relieving joint swelling, to treating urine and menstrual problems, as well as other issues. So you go to the spa, and there's some health benefits to it. And I guess we would all agree with that. We see it today. Erebola's, it looks like a grenade, but it's not. It's actually a little flask that they would use to keep oil in, the bathing oil. This is a bronze one here. This is from the 1st century AD. A bronze athlete's toilet set here of the Erebola's, the oil flask, and 2 strigils. They even had them in glass. Here's one in glass, pretty fragile, blue, beautiful blue glass. And then here we have one that's bronze, and they'd use a sponge. Its stopper is attached as part of the iron strigil. This one's from Italy. This one here is from a museum, and see it has a naked lady on the top that they'd use to decorate it. And this is probably a mirror. I'm just guessing on that. These were bronze toilet articles. Yeah, it says mirror here. I was right. And here we have bronze statue of someone holding the strigil right here. These are both from the British Museum. So that's a basic overview of our Roman bath complex and the architecture and the artifacts. So George, we're going to dive into some artifacts now, and you have a few
Sure. We
questions.
got a few we're going to share, the kind that you saw like a week ago that started you on preparing your PowerPoint.
Right.
I had this glass Archaeological, but I wasn't sure if it had, like they had, like it shows them attached to a ring.
Yeah.
Like they had the strigil. You can see where you could have an like a clip or an attachment, and you connect them all together. And I'm thinking, like, man, if you're walking, this clings together. This ain't going to stick around very long. It's going to just dump out. And then I saw a picture similar to yours, but it was like 3, 4, 5 different pictures of glass Archaeological attached. So I guess, okay, so then that's why I took it out and to share with everybody. So here's a nice fancy one. You can see the lid.
Yeah. Yeah, beautifully done. Yeah, it's amazing how, how fragile these things are. And you think, how long are they going to last? When we excavated at Tel El Hammam, we found a number of glass fragments of jars and vessels. So we didn't find a whole one like you have there. They're pretty rare, but they did use glass.
Yeah.
There we have the strigil. That's pretty cool. When you sent me your photos initially of what you had just extricated out of on loan from the museum vault,
Yes.
I spotted that initially, and I thought, wow, that's a strigil. I knew it as soon as I saw it, and sure enough, it's does it have any markings on it, George?
It has some here, but it's still deteriorated.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. When it talked about little markings, right, to identify whose it is or something. Yeah, you can't see it, but it's right here, 2 markings side by side. And what I was looking for initially is that if it was part of a Roman Legion's kit, it might have a stamp of a Roman Legion in it because they had the 10th Legion stationed in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
and of course it's represented as a 10, but also they have other symbols that represent that legion. And one was a wild boar, a pig, right? A
Right.
wild boar represent. So I thought, is that a wild boar and is that a 10? Because one is long, you can't see it. Man, one is kind of like longer, like this. It's a square that has an imprint in it. I'm thinking that's where they might have put the swine, and underneath it is like a small box, and that's where they probably put the X. So the 10th Legion. Very,
Right.
and it's very common because how many 10th Legion tile fragments have they found? Thousands. So we know that of course, they were there, and they did make lots of items, and they placed their insignias on them. Okay, then you also mentioned something else, right?
All right. Yeah. You got to have the oil lamp.
And that's the one that you
Jesus'
found that
light
says the
shines
light
for
of
all.
Christ shines for all.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. It's got the Greek inscription around there are abbreviations. It doesn't spell out, they put the Greek letters in there as abbreviations, the theos and
And then I think another thing helps to identify a period of time
right.
would be coins. So I brought some coins. You can't tell. Once again, these are Bar Kokhba coins. I'm sure we get pictures of Bar Kokhba coins.
Yeah,
And
we'll show some blow ups of them there to
yeah, yeah, yeah. So these are no big deal. But Bar Kokhba dates between 132 and 135. And it represents the second Jewish revolt.
right.
And this would be the revolt under Hadrian. But coins can help
Again,
identify a time period and everything else.
yeah,
Yes,
date to the Roman periods.
date to the Roman period.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Oh,
of course, this would date more to the Byzantine period. The design, at least the design, is a
yeah, that'd be
Byzantine,
Byzantine. Yeah.
and then it, of course, has the inscription on it that glorifies Christ. So then we can say, oh, Byzantine period Christian. So
Very cool.
interesting, very interesting. I like how you took us showed us different Roman baths, and then also you took us through a Roman bath so people get an idea of what it is and how it functions,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
I
they
don't,
are very interesting.
yeah. Usually what happens is that, people talk about a Roman bath and think it's just one room and,
Yes.
people just went into like a big swimming pool, but it was a process. Um, it was a cultural event. It was central to all of Roman life. It's not
Mhm.
like this was just in Rome or in big cities. Every city had them. I mean, people had to cleanse themselves. And so you had the aqueducts attached to it. Places like Laodicea had the advantage of having the hot baths. And of course, Tel El Hammam has the hot springs and that really elevates the focus of
Right.
hot baths or the hot bath complex in those centers. While Herod Antipas was using the hot bath there at Livius. There was another one down the road, not too far from us in Jordan, but this was the one that was probably his own personal one. So they had them all different temperatures, and Hierapolis was another place, and it also has connections to medicine because the hot springs produced an eye salve that was used for the eyes. We'll talk about that perhaps in another
Oh, yes, yes,
podcast.
the ISAF. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about we'll maybe do a podcast on Roman medicine and talk about Galen. We talked about that earlier today. So
Yeah, I
that's in the
just want
works,
to talk about.
folks. Stay tuned with us. We got lots of neat artifacts to show you, and we keep finding new things in the vault that we can bring out and put on display for the world to see.
Yeah, and this was in a selection of artifacts that we retrieved from a vault, and part of it was as I was going through the vault, I noticed this is bronze, but I know some items had been infected. It's called bronze disease. It happens sometimes, when the environment becomes a little bit too humid, different moistures can cause it. So you got to take those items out and treat it. So why I'm treating certain items from the museum to preserve them, and also we also took items out for show and tell.
Right.
So anyway, once again, a plug for the Museum of Archaeology and Biblical History. A fraction of the artifacts that are in there. Really enjoy sharing it with everybody. I know David enjoys putting his PowerPoints together and giving us a really good look at the use of a strigil in a Roman hot bath. People might think everybody used soap and water, and not hardly,
Yeah. No, they use something harder.
right?
A metal tool. Yeah. So it's
So
pretty neat. So it's
yeah. So anyway, David, that was a really good example of leading us through uh, the Roman bath system. When people get an opportunity, I know this is difficult times. I really enjoyed walking through the reconstruction of the hot bath at the I say
Betchan.
yeah, SHE. How do you pronounce it? I say sometimes I say Beit Shan.
Yeah, Betchan. Yeah, probably that's the Hebrew, better the Hebrew way.
Beit Shan. Yes,
I pronounce things usually the way it's
right.
phonetical.
Either way, but they did a really good job of preserving it out there and then giving examples of the utensils that are used.
Yeah. And if you get
And
a chance
also,
to go to Masada as well, it's a really good example because they have it
Sada's a good one.
cutaway of it there too. So there's some good examples around that you can take in. But again, every place you go, if you go to Turkey, you're going to see them at Sardis.
Yes.
You're going to see them at Laodicea because every city had them. So you look
But
for them.
something that was new to me, I know I like to act like I'm a know-it-all. I didn't know that they had shops close to the Roman baths that you
Yeah,
showed them lined up.
yeah,
And that makes sense because people are in the business of making money, right?
yeah.
So you get something to eat or to drink and you go in there and relax and I think,
And the Jewish synagogue was right next door to the
yes,
gymnasium in Sardis, which was kind of interesting because on the back side of the synagogue we found some Jewish shops and we also found some Gentile shops. And we
yeah,
knew that from some of the motifs and graffiti that we found on the walls. But it showed that the Jewish population there at Sardis was large, influential, and had a central place in their society. And
right.
we also find in one of their cities an inscription in the
Mhm.
theater seats, reserved for the God-fearers. So
That's true, yeah.
again, this is all tied together in the Roman culture, and the heart of this is the Roman bath complex, where you'd go to get refreshed, get a little exercise, and get cleansed. So pretty important.
Right. Well, great presentation. I appreciate it. I learned something every time,
Yeah,
and
me
I'm sure
too.
the listening audience did too. And I appreciate everybody's participation in our archaeological podcast. We're up to like 233,000 subscribers. I
Wow.
appreciate that. Yeah, quite pretty amazing, I think, for a couple old guys doing
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, that's right.
But we
Digging around
enjoy
the
it too.
dirt.
So it's nice to see that what we do is being appreciated. And it's a pleasure to be able to bring these actual artifacts from the museum vaults and share it with everybody. And if stay tuned for what's coming up next, because you know what? We got a selection of iron artifacts here, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. Because if I just go, I don't know if
Great.
people can see that when we go to the vault, it isn't like we just get a couple of things. If I if I do a little shift, I don't know if people can see that table behind me.
Yeah, we got a few things there to show.
So here we got Roman, or this is Greek. And I didn't know if we wanted to share some, like something from we got the Roman period, but then you got different types of pottery from different cultures being represented. So hey,
Yeah,
there was
well,
fun stuff. So stick around because we want to share this with everybody because it's a lot of fun.
sneak peek. I
Uh,
think next week we're going to talk about the Elgin marbles and a little bit of
yes,
controversy. And
I'm not going to give that away.
That's
That's
where
going
the
to be
Greek
very
will come in.
controversial. You're right. Yep. I wonder if they did like a magic trick, like like open this up and doves fly out. Oh,
Uh,
it's grapes. No.
George,
Yeah.
just don't rub it.
Oh yeah. Oh, we got tons of lamps. Just can't rub them the wrong way.
Great. Well, so stay tuned, folks, for next week. We'll talk about maybe the Elgin marbles and, you know, we'll look at the controversy around should we give them back or should we keep them? So we're going to talk about that next week, and you can be thinking about that, and that's where the Greek stuff will come in.
Right. So once again, this is my name is Dr. George Sparks and Dr. David Graves. Thanks for joining us. Until next week. You have a good day. Thank you.